Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping today at the Hollywood Museum on Highland in the historic Max Factor building. And waiting to be interviewed are author Leslie Cockburn and architect, interior designer William Georgis. Author Leslie Cockburn was born in San Francisco, went to Santa Catalina School. Was it for girls?
Yes.
Yes, it was. And graduated from Yale University and the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. Her awards for producing and directing films are endless, and included in that an Emmy for The Nuclear Battlefield and the Robert Kennedy Award for Peter Jennings' reporting from the killing fields. She's a woman who's gotten the Film Critics Award for American Casino, and she's written books, articles about Colombia, Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, Haiti, all the hot spots.
Exactly.
How does someone like that get there?
Get to the hotspot.
Yes.
Well, you have to start somewhere. The place I started before I knew what I was doing was in Libya.
Even more hotspot, right?
I was sent as a very young woman. I was working with the NBC bureau in London, and I was sent to go and get an interview with Muammar Gaddafi. And I had to hop onto a plane in Paris and get off in Libya. I didn't have a visa, but I managed to get in and get that interview.
Did you know that you had to do all that? Did you know you needed visas? Did you know you needed all that at that time?
Barely.
Barely. You teach journalism at Princeton.
I did, yes. I was a Ferris professor at Princeton.
But I wanted to make sure we got that in. But did you study producing and film?
No, I did not. I studied, what I studied at Yale and the University of London was English literature, anthropology, and African history.
Well,
colonial
what
history.
Were you going to do with that?
Well,
because you wanted to be a journalist, right?
I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist until, well, in the middle of my Yale career, I thought I wanted to be an anthropologist. So
which is great.
I went off to Africa, and I went and lived in a village where a lot of people in the village had never even seen a white person, looked at themselves in a mirror, read a book, seen a movie, and this was a transforming experience for me. It was so interesting that it really turned me toward journalism.
And who'd you go with?
That was there's a wonderful group called the Flying Doctors.
Oh,
and they
fantastic.
had a ground team, an African ground team who were concerned with people, health problems. Why is it that in this area there are so many health problems?
Did you feel that need to be with the doctors, or was that just like a group that you were going to go with?
It was a group that I had connections to.
I see.
At the time. And so it was a way to find some role, even though I was so young. I was a student, but to find something to do in Africa.
Were you writing? Did you write for any newspapers, journals?
That was when I was an undergraduate. No, I just did a report for the graduate school in Nairobi.
And then did you go into TV?
The first thing I did 2 things at once. I went into TV because friends had said, you've got to meet these people. I was living in London, and they said, you have to meet these people at the NBC Bureau. They're just incredible. So I started in television, and I also I won a Vogue writing prize, so I did some things for British Vogue as well. But then moved into, as a very junior position, at 60 Minutes, and then did ended up doing CBS Reports and PBS Frontline, and then writing books and writing for magazines.
When you think of a journalist, you always think of print journalism, whereas in your case, it's not print journalism.
Well, it's both.
Is
I mean,
it both?
I've done both, which is unusual. I mean, I've written a number of pieces for Vanity Fair as well as...
On the political process that that's where I've seen your work.
For
at
Vanity
Condé
Fair,
Nast.
I've written about China, you know, the emerging, the new leaders in China. I've written about Colombia, the problems in Colombia, the drug wars. I wrote about Iraq. I did a trip and had a very unusual meeting with Saddam Hussein's sons, Uday and Qusay, the only journalists who ever did that.
Oh, did you? With
Yeah.
the two? They're both
The
dead,
boys,
right?
they're both dead.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it was a very interesting evening because this was in 1993, I believe, and I was in Baghdad with my husband, who's also a journalist, Andrew Cockburn, and we were having dinner at a little bistro in the Rashid Hotel in Baghdad, and there were lots of families having dinner. It was kind of full, and suddenly these boys, Saddam's sons, walked into the restaurant with their entourage, and everyone in the restaurant put down their forks and knives and got up and left.
They did?
They were so terrified of these people. So
Because-
there was only one table left.
Because what happened? Did you know who they were?
I did, but we were paralyzed. And so there were 3 or 4 of us sitting at this table. And this entourage moved to the table next door, and there was the musician and the jeweler and the newspaper editor all around these two Saddam's sons. So one of them came over and invited me to join them at their table.
Wow.
And that was a kind of tricky thing because they had a terrible reputation. The oldest used to carry a golden gun and was known to use it on husbands when he liked their wives.
Oh my God, your
But-
poor husband.
Yeah, he was nervous. He was nervous, but it was an opportunity you couldn't miss up. So I did join them and had an incredible dinner. And of course, I wrote about the whole thing.
Did you stay the whole time? You stayed during the whole dinner at their table?
I did.
You did. Because, you know, when
Well,
we
there was
would
a
go-
moment when I excused myself. I thought this could get.
Yeah, how long
know.
can you stay there? I remember coming from Jordan to go to Damascus, from Amman to Damascus, and there's that little off-ramp that says Baghdad. And I
Yes.
always wanted to take that street to Baghdad, but we could never do it because we weren't allowed in. And here you were having dinner there.
But so I was there while Saddam was in charge, and then was there during both the Gulf Wars. And all of that material went into this book, Baghdad Solitaire.
This is our new book that we're talking about, your new book. But who opened the doors for you in those situations? Like this situation in Baghdad, you were just sitting there.
Yes.
You opened your own door,
Yes.
in other words. But who opened the doors for you to go to Colombia? I mean, we were in Colombia. We didn't meet with any warlords. But you did?
Well, you have to be looking for them. You have to be looking for them. It's interesting. In Colombia, there's a lot of serendipity to this. Because when I was first in Colombia, it was a very bad time, and there weren't a lot of people. You couldn't even walk outside of the hotel without bodyguards. It was that
really?
dangerous. Not 10 steps outside the hotel. So it was through a series of very unusual people.
Was that Medellin or in?
This was in Bogota.
It was in Bogota. You were still so.
Yes, absolutely. And there were a lot of bombs going off, and there was a bomb that ripped off the whole face of the secret police building. And in any case, my husband and I are very interested in art. So at the time, oddly enough, there was an art show in the old part of Bogota. So we went there and met some very interesting artists, and we met a filmmaker, and we met a senator, and with them, we then got entree to go to Cali.
Oh.
And the Cali cartel was as big as the Medellin cartel, but through very odd circumstances. In fact, through a filmmaker, we first nearly got killed by the Cali cartel.
When the first time you went?
Because the filmmaker had been to school with the head of production of the cartel, and he said, there won't be any problem We'll just go to his house on Sunday afternoon, knock on the door, and I'm sure he'll see us.
Yes, he's having barbecue, right?
They were playing soccer and having a picnic. So he did that and came out white as a sheet, and he said, I have bad news. He's going to kill me and you if we don't leave this town in 24 hours.
Oh, the whole town. You had to leave. You didn't have to leave his front door.
The whole town.
You had to leave the town.
But we didn't want to leave the town. So what we did is I wrote him a note with my best etiquette. I wrote a note.
Santa Catalina.
Absolutely. Santa Catalina. I wrote the note and also had some films, they happened to be about the war in Central America. And anyway, we sent them over. And it turned out that this guy really secretly wanted to direct. And he had a full edit suite in his house.
Oh,
he had
wow.
a screening room. He looked at the films. He wrote a note back saying, you're welcome anytime.
You're kidding.
No.
It is just what you say, the right thing at the right time, or maybe pursuing it a little bit longer.
Yeah, pursuing it.
But how you went back to Colombia several years later.
Yes.
Was it the same? How'd you find it now? I didn't find it frightening. I mean, I didn't find Medellin frightening or Bogota.
It's totally
a few years
different.
ago.
It's
Yeah.
totally different. Those cartels, it was like Romeo and Juliet, they were the Montagues and the Capulets, and they had this war going, and that's all gone now.
And I'm going to talk about Baghdad Solitaire because I don't want to run out of time. You have so many stories, and it's so great. A novel.
A novel.
Have you written novels before?
This is the first novel.
And
I've written nonfiction, but this is the first novel.
You've written nonfiction. And it's the launch for a new publishing company in Los Angeles.
Exactly. It's a very interesting publishing company. This is Bob Asahina and Bob Wallace. It's called Asahina and Wallace. These are two very, very well-known, experienced guys from New York who've moved to Los Angeles to start a new venture. Bob Asahina was a vice president at Simon & Schuster. Bob Wallace was managing editor of Rolling Stone. And they decided they're doing new publishing. So what new publishing means is less inventory in bookstores, more emphasis on ebooks, etc.
Oh, that's how they're doing it.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, do they do all soft cover?
You can
gonna be
either get softcover or ebook.
Oh, I see. So and the interesting thing that Bob Wallace said was there's more readers out here in Los Angeles than New York.
It's absolutely true.
How could that be?
LA is such a literate town, and everyone's reading, so it's really great to be here.
And so somebody said, you've got to read Leslie's manuscript, I guess. And
That's
they went,
right.
We want it.
Yes. It was an old friend of Bob Wallace, Bill Broyles, who started Texas Monthly, wrote Apollo 13, and he read the book and he said, you have to send this to these guys. And they immediately said, we want the book.
I know that. So it's their launch.
It's their launch.
It's their launch. Tell us about Baghdad Solitaire. You did a reading at the Bel Air Hotel. You've done readings at different places.
Yes.
San Francisco, I think.
San Francisco's coming up. I'm going there next, and then to New York and Washington. But this is a book. It's a political thriller. The protagonist is a woman.
Which is great.
She goes to Baghdad for the first time because a colleague of hers has disappeared. And it appears that he's been kidnapped, and so she is very anxious to go and find him. She goes to the Green Zone to talk to U.S. officials. It's very traumatic. She goes into the country. Her convoy is attacked, but she survives that, goes to the Green Zone, and the officials say, well, you think he's an aid worker. In fact, he's wanted for treason. This guy is arming the Mujahideen. So
this guy's arming him. So that's like this big twist in your plot.
Yeah, so from then, what does she do? There she is, and she has to take it from there through a real wilderness of mirrors, because there's so much deception in this war and lawlessness.
So this is your thriller, and we're thrilled that you were with us today.
Thank you
so much.
Great to be here.
And thanks for watching this part of the show. Don't go away. We have a New Yorker with us, Bill Georgis, architect. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here at the Hollywood Museum in the heart of Hollywood. And our guest is architect, interior designer William T. Georgis, who grew up in Illinois, where he attended the Illinois Institute of Technology, a school that specializes in Mies van der Rohe, his concepts and all the things that he stood for in the Bauhaus. And then William went on to Stanford, graduating in art history, and then Princeton for his master's in architecture. Michael Graves and Robert Venturi were early influences, as was his 10-year stint with Robert Stern. Your credits go on and on. You have worked with art curator, fabulous, Richard Marshall, and you've launched your independent practice, I think because of Richard's prodding. Probably, and help. So who were the other influences that came into your life? Were they classic or were they modernist?
Well, both really. You know, my background is in art history, and I studied, specialized really in ancient art and architecture of the Renaissance. And then when I moved to New York, I became much more interested in contemporary art, really through Richard Marshall and other friends. So my education is classically based, but I was immersed at a fairly young age in the contemporary art world. So I'm interested in both traditions.
So, Italian architect Scarpa?
Oh, of course. I love Scarpa's work. And I visited a number of his buildings in Italy. And
what happens with your training? How does the classical mix with the modern? Because I think that's part of work.
Well, one approach is really to allow classicism to create the foundation upon which you build, either conceptually or physically, and then with a modern sensibility, you can sort of mess with the house, so to speak, and use it to infuse a shot of adrenaline to do something different. But for me, it's always been interesting to base what I do on precedent, whether it's classical precedent, Gothic precedent, whatever type of precedent, and then work against it.
And when you started in Stern's office, was he doing the same type of thing?
He was always subverting convention. Yeah, and I learned there how to do that. Is an approach, as a strategy for making things.
And did he influence you in many of the things that you are doing now?
In approach, yes.
In approach.
Yeah, sure.
Was he green at the time?
No.
Because green wasn't green, was it?
No, he was certainly not green.
Tell us about it. Tell us what happens now. Because as working with him and then having to be green now, I guess, I don't know. Do you all have to be green?
Well, you try to be.
You
try as best you can because the resources of the planet are finite. So, but often I'm dealing with sort of very rare materials that are used sparingly to begin with. So.
And when you first opened your office, your first job, what was it?
It was an apartment renovation at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City.
And was it all about art?
There was extraordinary art in it, yes. Yeah. It was the architectural renovation really was calibrated around the collection.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and like so many of my projects are like that, where I'm working with extraordinary collections.
Like Lever House.
Well, like Lever House, and they're private clients I deal with who are contemporary art collectors. So.
And that also fits into what you're doing, right? You have to know the art. Correct.
Or if you don't, you have to be sensitive to it and you have to learn.
So, Lever House, did Lever House lead to this, make it fabulous?
Well, in some modernist masterpiece designed by Gordon Bunshaft, because it's a major landmark in New York City, facing Seagram's building across Park Avenue. And when the current owner, A.B. Rosen, bought the building, he was faced with the challenge of restoring the building. So the project was really about respectfully restoring what was there, not leaving one's mark.
So it's I don't know what it's like, a lobby area.
It's all the public spaces, the lobby, their exterior plazas.
Right, exterior plaza, and the restaurant.
Well, the restaurant was actually originally test kitchens for Lever Brothers products.
Oh, they would?
Yeah.
Oh, so that was great.
Interesting.
But so you had a book signing there too.
I did. I had a, well, actually, the book signing was across the street at the Seagram's building.
Oh, it was. But I think that's great because the book, which Architecture and Design of William Georgis, covers what?
Well, it covers my career since starting my own practice in 1992.
Oh, it does.
And it's new construction, new buildings, renovations, additions, interior design, furniture design, product design.
And it's all there.
It's all there.
No, it's not all there because I looked at it. I think there's a lot more. One of the things that is said in the book is that you're hands-on. What does a hands-on architect do?
Well, it means that you're involved with every facet of the project and you're micromanaging and controlling and driving everybody crazy.
I was going to say micromanaging.
But protecting the interests of your client and also protecting the artistic intent.
And that's what you want to do. I mean, it reflects on you, right, if you're not hands-on?
Sure.
So what kind of materials do you use that are different from other people?
Well, anything goes. Anything that's physically available goes, from what you would expect. Traditional materials, often the traditional materials are reworked in a way that they've never been treated before. So wood could be pushed and manipulated in ways that hasn't been done before. Same thing with stones. Different finishes could be applied to the stone. But often we're working with different things too, often antique bits and pieces that are incorporated into architecture or into furniture.
Oh, is that what you do?
Sure, all sorts, whatever it takes.
And especially being an interior designer, is that common with architects?
You know, there are a handful of architects who I respect working who do interiors. Usually there is not an animosity, but an antagonism between interior designers and architects, and I think a lack of respect going in either direction. So for me, trained as an architect, working in New York, working on renovation of spaces, and then it was the logical step to then help with the interior design. So
It seems logical to me. You know what you're designing, you know what you want to put in it,
right.
and if you know how to do it, I mean, it seems like that's what you should do. How can you have someone else come in and work in your space? It's not your mentality.
That's how I feel.
That's how you feel. Okay.
But you know, a lot of architects
That's how I
don't understand how to make people comfortable, how they should live, how to organize a room with furnishing and so forth. A lot of architects aren't trained to understand it or don't have an interest in understanding it.
Talking about that, there's a picture in here of a library.
Right.
Tell us about that. It's got like a spotted animal and
Right. Well,
lots of books.
Well, it's an old. It's a library in a late 19th century house on New York's Upper East Side. A beautiful room, all done in oak, which we had ebonized. And the room.
So was the wood there, or did you bring it in?
Yeah, it was all there. It was a late 19th century room that was intact, and we restored the room, and then went to town, really created a sort of cabinet of curiosities, including everything from dinosaur skeletons, 19th century taxidermy, dioramas, and then mirrored the entire ceiling to blow the scale out. The rug was made of black rabbit fur.
Is that what it was?
You know, there's alligator, there's skunk skins, there's all sorts of exotic and unusual bits and pieces to give you a sense of wonder.
And what kind of a client lets you do that?
A very adventurous client who trusts me.
Yeah, but it is true, isn't it? Because the room, and we have a picture on the screen, is fantastic. So from there, you came to La Jolla. I have to go to La Jolla because I think that's totally different from this room you're talking about.
Well, it isn't.
Here you are, two New Yorkers coming to La Jolla. Why don't you go to the Hamptons?
Well, because my parents spent the last 20 years of, well, we do have a place in the Hamptons, but my parents spent the last 20 years of their lives in La Jolla, and we thought at a certain point it was time to grow up and get our own house, so that's what we did.
Oh, and what kind of house is it?
It's a 1956 modernist house up on the side of Mount Soledad, about 350 feet above sea level.
And do you spend time there?
I do. I try to spend as much as possible.
And then totally opposite, your 50s house is your house in New York where your office is.
Right.
On 72nd Street?
That's right.
And I know it's open and easy for me to say that because you said it's glass. Just walk by and you can see everything.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, you know, it's a New York City townhouse. It's about 18 feet wide, very narrow.
Oh, 18 feet wide?
And it's in a neighborhood that is surrounded by more historic, traditional masonry buildings. So I wanted to do something a little different. So it's a completely glass building, front and back, so you could look through the house.
And how do you keep it warm or cool or whatever?
That's taken care of. We've got a sophisticated HVAC system, so it's comfortable.
Did you design the furniture for it? Because I know you design furniture.
Sure, some of the furniture and some of it's antique pieces mixed with contemporary designs of my own and with 20th century pieces, all sorts of stuff.
And you also design fabric.
That's right. I've done fabrics and rugs. And
For companies or just for your clients?
I have done rugs for a company, but mainly they're one-offs for clients.
And fabrics as well? Same way?
I've done textiles before. I
Textiles?
started my own firm
Oh, you did?
when I worked for Bob Stern, yeah.
What do you collect?
I collect contemporary art. I collect Greek and Roman antiquities.
Look at the difference.
I collect 18th century furniture. I collect whatever I fancy.
You have room in your 4 stories?
It's actually
3
five
five
stories.
stories? Oh,
Yeah. Well, and in California and in Southampton.
so good. So how long did it take to do the book?
About a year, a little over a year.
And then did you choose a photographer and the
Yeah,
writer?
yeah. I mean, I'd had everything photographed over the years, and so.
Oh. I think it's great.
Thank you, Joan.
And I'm so glad you were here with us today.
It's an honor being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com.